today as people kind of filter in. So super excited about this panel on health and wellness. I think, you know, we've kind of heard throughout the day that women are wildly underrepresented in research, which then leads to, I will say from my perspective, so I guess I didn't say before, I am an active duty flight surgeon, so I'm a family medicine board certified doc by background. I tend to do a lot of women's health at each of my bases, because as we heard before, there was a pretty big divestiture of having women's health at a lot of installations. So sometimes I just show up and I happen to be the only person that's able to do that, although I do debunk that a little bit because every single primary care doc does get trained on how to do PAPs. So it's a function of our system right now, kind of pushing more volume through the system, but that's another story for another day. That being said, I wanted to give some time for our two newer of the panel. You met two of my panel members, and then our two that didn't get to have a talk today. And then I really do want to get to hear your questions. I have questions of my own, but quite frankly, I'm sick of hearing my own voice at this point. So I would rather hear from you guys first. So go ahead and start it off.
My name is MAJ Alivia Stehlik. I am an active duty Army physical therapist. I'm also the medical advising team leader out at 3rd Security Force Assistance Brigade in lovely Texas. I am also, as a trans woman, part of the only DoD projects to ever come in under budget and on time. So was in when I transitioned and still am stayed active, deployed to Afghanistan immediately post-transition. So that was a really exciting time in my life and in the lives of all of the people around me. So I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk a bit about women's health and wellness, and also some experience of, I spent 30 years on testosterone and the last 7 on estrogen, and it is not the same.
Probably uniquely qualified to talk about that hormonal transition. So I'm excited about some of these questions. Go ahead.
All right, I'm MAJ Tashina Miller. I'm a social worker by trade, so active duty Army, behavioral health officer at the moment for 3rd SFAB. I've served at pretty much every position you can in Army mental health, from enlisted to officer now. Liv is correct here as far as it's not the same as far as hormones, even for the brain. And I know you mentioned that a little bit, but we'll probably talk more about it.
Perfect. And kind of reintroduce
So
yourself.
Holly McClung, I'm a nutritional physiologist for the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. I work in the military performance group, and my area of focus is female warfighter health and special populations.
Jenna Stedman, I'm a performance dietitian, worked with a couple different H2F programs.
It's Dr. Jenna Stedman.
Dr.
I don't
Jenna
know
Stedman,
if you remember.
For those
I
of you-
do, so it's fine. So I want to roll into the audience. If we have any like first brave souls that want to have, I see one up there already. Let's do it.
Thank you so much. So when I joined the Army, I was 95 pounds, and I was told, you're a perfect candidate. I went to training, and I was weak. I could not complete a lot of the ACFT and soldier tasks. So the first thing I did was I trained, and I started gaining a lot of weight. I went on my most recent deployment. I was 135 pounds, which is a huge difference, but I wasn't always passing height and weight, but I was finally always passing the ACFT. So when we're getting these kind of competing information and these competing priorities, how do we, as young officers, young soldiers, service members, how do we balance those priorities? Because at this point, I felt like when I was 90 pounds, I couldn't pass the ACFT without getting injured, but now I can do it and I can't pass height and weight.
I can take that one.
First.
Yeah. So Priya, this is a great segue, I think, into a lot of work that we probably all do. I just finished the Army body composition study. So my team and the research that we captured in the Army, which was over 2,000 soldiers, men and women, that statistically represents the Army of today. We made the recommendations for the 5 forward, the performance change. So like if you get an ACFT score, you can be exempt from the body comp. We also made the recommendations to change the way that we're measuring females, because what we found in using the DEXA scanner and comparing the circumference measurements for men and for women, and using a 3D scanner and using a BIA device, we found that there was discrepancies in bias, and so we're trying to rectify that. But the policy is kind of three-pronged. You know, it's performance, and it's body composition, and it's also linked to injury, to musculoskeletal injury. So I worked really closely with SMA Grinston in really getting that policy out, and that it's important to say, you know, we still care about the health of our soldiers, so we need to have that body composition piece in, but it needs to be kind of a trifecta of performance, body composition, and injury kind of all interplaying. And I think it's the first time the Army's kind of had a data set to show that, you know, this maybe is the way right now that fits the Army, and maybe we need to adjust as we go, looking at the data. But I think that's a great point. And you know, when the ACFT came to be the test of record, that's why they wanted to look at the body composition, because we knew that the shape was going to change of soldiers because we're working out differently. And I think it's a lifestyle change, and it's a good change for the Army. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of covered in all bases.
So a follow-on from the online audience that had asked a question earlier today was, do you believe the ACFT unfairly disadvantages women by emphasizing tests of raw strength and using this as a criterion for combat readiness? So I guess in a related kind of realm, you know, gut feelings.
Oh, I have so many feelings. So I guess I'll caveat this with, can we go back a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think one of the questions, and perhaps the perspective that I take on this as a provider, is how do you feel now compared to then?
I feel better physically, and I feel like I'm
Yes.
a better part of the team, and I'm closer
Right.
to my providers.
Right.
And I'm really embarrassed when I'm standing in line getting ready to be taped because a good officer doesn't get taped.
Right. And well, there's so that, and we need to kill that first. We need to kill that, right? Good officers not getting taped needs to not be a thing. But I think there's this piece of, you're a person, right? Like, you're a human being, and if you feel better and you perform better, then presumably we need to change the policies, right, that Holly's talking about. How do we change the policy to fit the fact that you feel better and you perform better? Right? Like, that's what matters. We're here to win the wars. If you feel better, you're going to do better, and if you do better, you're going to perform better, and your team's going to be better, and you're going to feel better as part of the team, so the team's going to be more cohesive, and so everything is going to go better. That matters, right? That sense of belonging matters, and that provider-patient team thing happens too. Command trusts providers, providers trust patients, patients trust command. Right? There's a lot of trust there, so I think that matters a lot. In terms of disadvantaging people, I think that standards matter. We're an organization of standards. It's having the right standards that matter, and I think asking the right questions is really important too. So are we disadvantaging women? I think that what's the question that needs to be asked is, if you're in a job, and this is, you know, I'm an active duty Army officer, this is a perspective of Liv Stehlik, not the United States Army. I liked the MOS specific things where if you need to be able to pull somebody out of a tank that's on fire, that's wearing 100 plus pounds of body armor on top of whatever their body weight is, that person who is burning doesn't care what gender you are. They care if you can do that thing, right? So it's not about disadvantaging someone, but if you are a surgeon, like, I need to know if you can stand for 12 or 18 or 20 hours a day in an operating room without a lot of sleep, over and over and over again, and still be efficient and save people's lives. That's a very different physical fitness requirement, right? So those things matter, and I think asking the right questions to how are we doing this? Are we grading things the right way? Are we appropriately saying, hey, these standards matter? And we can say that a standard matters across the board for the Army, that some level of physical fitness is important. And I obviously could talk about this for a long time because I have feelings, but so I think that there's a lot of room to talk about that. But I think that strength matters. You feel better being stronger, and I think that that is probably true across the population.
And I can agree with that. Any of the soldiers that I've worked with that get sent to me because they're failing height weight, they're all passing the ACFT. They feel great. They feel, you know, confident in their body. They know that they can perform well. They're eating well. There's not a lot nutritionally I can do. I'm not going to take calories away and compromise injury and compromise their overall health or compromise maybe the next ACFT score, the next mission, whatever they're doing, so that they can lose 10 pounds. So the 540 rule is one of the greatest things that have come out of military recently that significantly improved my practice, because we were no longer looking to lose 5-10 pounds just to make weight. We were just trying to improve performance and fitness. So your story is not unique. I've worked with so many who have had that exact same experience. So I hope that makes you feel just a little bit better. And then lots and lots of people are in that very same boat. Yeah.
I think we need to change the stigma and the culture.
Yes.
I think working with the female elite warfighters, one of the reasons that the body comp study came to be is because these are our MVPs. These are the women that you want pulling you out of the tank, and they were failing body comp, and they were 20% body fat. So, but it was the stigma. They had just, aced at the time the APFT, and now they're standing in line in front of all their soldiers getting taped. But you have to be proud that you're strong and that it's in your head and it's society. And so I think it's just going to take a little while for those things to kind of change.
I'm going to toss one to mental health to bring you in here. So are there women-specific factors related to mental health? And what do we need to be paying attention to? So Jing brought up in her presentation that we're still seeing PTSD on the rise among women warfighters. My sense is, as a physician, right, so how do we ask questions on a post-deployment health questionnaire? It's very trauma-specific, right? It is very much, did you discharge your firearm? Did you see dead bodies? Did you handle dead bodies? Do you feel like hurting yourself or anyone else? At no time do we talk about, at least in the last year, I haven't done a DHA since I've been here at Lincoln, but hey, have you been the victim of sexual trauma or sexual assault? And so I'm wondering if that plays a role in what you're
Right,
saying.
and I think, again, as we've been saying all day, there's a gap in research, and especially gender or biological sex specific, even with PTSD, but you're hitting the nail on the head from what research we do have, right? There doesn't seem to be a difference, again, in the limited research we have. If you're talking about post-traumatic stress symptoms as far as employment stressors or deployment stressors, but where there does seem to be a large difference is in that sexual assault, sexual harassment realm. And again, I think somebody mentioned index trauma, and does that make a difference? Again, that seems to be a hypothesis that seems to be carried forward because it seems to be going to be true. So yeah, asking those types of questions seems to be. Additionally, we can talk about this all day long, but while we're on that type of topic, any childhood events of such is obviously going to put people at higher risk for post-traumatic stress symptoms.
I think brings a valid point, right? So, as we're all in a recruiting crisis, we can't, I don't think maybe the Marine Corps might have met their recruiting goals, but no one else did by a long shot, right? So what does that mean from the medical standards? We end up writing a lot of waivers, a lot of exception to policies to bring more people in, which a lot of those people will come in with pre-existing traumatic experiences. I spent a lot of time in my last command doing initial flying physicals for our special operations pipeline. And, there is, it's hard to write a standard that captured this kid overcame a difficult thing in their childhood, which seems like you guys saw in your studies, like, hey, this was actually very protective. A lot of these kids that built grit versus this person's trauma they have not fully recovered from. And I don't know how to tease that out, but I would love to hear from you guys on the panel on your thoughts of how, as we move forward, and knowing that we're going to bring more people in with pre-existing conditions, and how do we best handle that as a DoD, really.
So I'll take this from a non-mental health perspective. Our surgeon called me today and said, hey, we got a kid that wants to come to our unit, and our unit is a selective unit. You have to pass a Ranger physical and do a bunch of different things. And he said he's got some back history of different physical complaints and stuff, and what do you think about this? And he said, well, here's the deal, right? Like, I can look at that injury and that associated rehab that this kid has been through and say, that can go one of two ways. That could be somebody who comes to this unit and then says, I'm hurt, I got a med board out of the Army. Or that could be somebody who is, hey, I'm doing everything that I can because I want to go to this unit, and I'm going to push through this limitation that I have in a specific way. And I'm gonna know that by meeting that person, by talking to them, by talking to their leadership. I'm going to go back to trust, right? There is this two-way street. So I'm going to call this kid tomorrow or the next day and say, hey, tell me about yourself. Like, why do you want to come here? We know that you have this medical stuff, but you're not a piece of paper. And that becomes a little bit more challenging when we're talking about recruiting. But I think if we're talking about national security, we're not shying away from something that's challenging, right? Yes, it's challenging to reach out to those people, but those people, right? This guy's a medic. He's going to be responsible for saving my guys' lives, my gals' lives. So that matters. So that challenge of like, yeah, I have to figure out how this one person, are they going to fit or not? Well, I might have to figure out, like, what is their story? What happened to them? And did they overcome it? Or is this like, ooh, you're not going to be okay here, right? Like, you can tell those things. You meet people that are like, you're not going to do okay here.
But I think that takes time, right?
It
And
does.
resources. And from the mental health aspect, again, one reason why I don't think we screen any more than what we do is there isn't, one screener that's going to tell us, hey, someone had this event. They're going to do well or they're not, right? Then back to that grit or that hardiness, which is also very difficult to measure, right? But very good qualitative data. So I think, again, Tashina Miller's take is that we don't necessarily limit it, because I don't know that we could in an accurate way, right? I think it's just more of the discussion that we're people, or the discussion I have with leaders is, again, we're human beings, right? At the end of the day, readiness is key. But again, we have to know as human beings, we can't, run at 9,000 RPM 24/7 without expecting that something's going to go wrong. So I think it's just more of a piece and the education to leaders that we need to build in, like the self-care, the prevention, all those things, instead of just waiting until the car breaks, if you will.
Other questions? I see a hand. Go for it.
Back to body composition. I had the pleasure of being a fly on the wall in an OSD level meeting not too long ago on body composition, and to be quite honest, same opinion, it was kind of disheartening because all the different service reps, it almost turned into a bunch of PhDs, providers, basically poking, being like, no, you're wrong, no, we're right, the Navy's right, the Army's right. It was very disheartening from a service member, and I'm a big proponent of jointness, and I think it's utterly sad if, we have an MOS or an AFSC in the Air Force, very similar MOS in the Army, and we're requiring these two people to meet very different requirements, whereas downrange they may deploy together and have the same requirement. So I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts in a joint, like body composition standard, and then also your insight into, if you have any, into kind of why, my experience in this meeting where the services, all the scientists seem to come from vastly different pages when it came to the data.
Yeah, so Dr. Friedel just walked in, so he is leading the Marine Corps body composition study. And so I think everyone's sitting around the table. I think that they're talking about the DoDI, the 1308 DoDI, and trying to bring some kind of consistency across the services. I know that I know the Navy's doing a body composition study. So I feel like it's almost like we just kind of have to have a meeting of the minds and say, what's the best, what's the best science? Like, what was the, everyone has data sets. What's the best way to look at the data set and make something that works for today's modern warfighter, whether it's a soldier, a sailor, a Marine. And I think we're getting to that point. I'm interested to see kind of where it all goes. I know that working group just kicked off a couple weeks ago, and so I think that they're going to try to deal with some of the issues around the body composition policies across the services.
If I can just interject, I think most of the services kind of lost the battle on obesity. There's COVID, there's what's happening in the national population, the group problem. We have to take full away groups and figure out how to help them get in shape. And maybe has to float, maybe they need a higher fat standard rider. Maybe just kind of put their program as a whole together. So the story is okay about Air Force and then they don't have a serious weight. I think Army is kind of losing the battle because right now our statistics are that all of us know about this, and I think that our data is just real high. And more than 20% of the Army is over the 30 years. Right, so keep something in place, but maybe it's time to, we're not gonna pay so much attention to this part of H2F, and kind of that. Can you perform physically? And, we might just shift that. I mean, just having body fat standards for the sake of body fat standards, just did it.
Once before, doesn't necessarily make sense anymore.
I mean, I think one of the things is that we are able to link body fat and body size to injury, and that's something that we were able to, something we were able to show in the Army body composition study, is that there is a link between musculoskeletal injury incidence and body size and body fat. So I think that, I think that's where the Army is right now, and I think that, I think there's differences across the service, across the services, and just kind of coming together.
Holly's right on that, we know that it's a pretty narrow threshold there, where people come in above a certain body fat. Maybe it's associated with very much fitness, but they're at just much higher risk of musculoskeletal. But you gotta decide you're going to set that risk and have all these injuries, lose all these new recruits, which is really expensive. Or what the Army's doing right now is they've got free
That picks up another thread though, right? So are there differences in the sexes in how we should be approaching how they lose body fat, right? And how do we get after some of those things? And I think we've talked about some of those as well. Is the one size fits all PT approach a thing of the past, or does it need to be a thing of the past? So I'll leave it to you.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely, 100% it needs to be a thing of the past. I talk about this all the time, right? As a trans person in the military, I have to be the poster child for standards, right? Because there's this idea, and all of you women who have blazed these trails are very familiar with this idea that you have to meet and exceed all the standards, because if you don't, then you're not just a soldier, sailor, airman, marine who didn't do the thing right, you're a female soldier, sailor, airman, marine who didn't do the thing. Or in my case, a trans person who didn't do the thing, right? So there's this upholding of standards that matter, right? But I can require everyone to meet the same standard and say, the way you get to this standard might look very different than the way that somebody else gets to this standard, right? The amount and volume and pace and weight that a 6'4", 240 human being, presumably male human being, is going to train to pass a 12-mile ruck march might look very different than a 95-pound, 5-foot-something human being, presumably a woman, is going to train to meet some standard, right? Like, you can say you have to meet the same standard because that's what we say, right? Or because war demands it, right? Whatever the service says. But how we train to meet that standard should be very different, right? That's going to be true. And it might not be the same from woman to woman either, right? Like, it's not just a sex difference, it's an individual difference. And if we just believed people when they're like, hey, today is not a day I can train hard, like, this is a novel idea, right? Colonel Metzer said this earlier. She's like, I had to show somebody my hair that this was a problem. Like, what is that? Why would you not just believe that if I tell you this is a problem, it's a problem, right? Like, what if I didn't have to prove to you that this were a problem? What if you just believed me, and then we could move on together without me having to prove that this is a problem? I understand that data matters, but also, we could believe people, and that matters too. Sorry.
So I don't think it's, I know this is a women's symposium, I don't think it's just women, like when we're talking about body composition,
right?
Some of the senior leaders said, well, that's a problem of women standing in line to get taped. And it actually took some men sitting around the table to say, I was the fat boy. I had a problem standing in line, sir. And that is difficult too, So I think that it's kind of a time where it's okay to be transparent, to speak up, to self-advocate, because we're held, not me, but you're held to all these standards. And I think that for some reason, it's like kind of the wave of senior leaders right now. Some of them are very open to social media and to making sure that everyone's kind of got a say in it, but there's still the stigmas of some of the older leaders and just their perspective of when they went through and they had to be taped, because once you reach a certain level, the taping changes a little.
What? Well, I think there's a time scale piece here too. Right?
And I kind of want to hit each of you, or each of the panelists to have the opportunity, but what opportunities are we missing that if we address could actually help us retain women in military service?
I have a tiny idea. So, well, I can, I guess, just kind of speak to my own experience. So, working with the National Guard programs, they have a very cool thing with their new recruits, the Recruit Sustainment Program, RSP, which I loved working with the brand new kids. They were so excited to be there. They didn't know anything yet, which is great. But they would all come in, and they were a perfect representation of exactly what our general public looks like right now, right? We're not getting as much time in PE classes. No one has health class in school anymore. Like, they're not learning these very basic things, and suddenly you're 18, you're signing on the dot, and you don't know how to feed yourself. You don't know how to train. You're not doing all of these things, and now you're signing up for something very, very hard to do. So it was really quite exciting to work with the RSP group because they would come in, they were very eager for knowledge, and they would make these amazing changes before they even went off to basic, which was the coolest thing to see them, and they were so proud of themselves for learning something and doing the work. And sometimes it was weight loss, because let's be honest, that's a lot of what we were kind of signing waivers for. But also it was the training, it was the ACFT, and we weren't seeing a lot of injuries throughout it because they had this great knowledge that they were coming in with. So to give us just a tiny piece of hope, I would love to see more RSP-ish kind of models, either in other branches or however it's going to work best for everyone, but some version of that it's almost like a pre-prepare for these types of things with a big education model in there, hopefully.
Keep on down the road.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a tough one. I think Sydney hit on it. I think kind of getting a handle on, the burnout of these really high-performing women, and trying to help understand so that the environment is just a little bit more friendly for them, so that we can just kind of retain their talent and their mentorship throughout the longevity of their career. I think that's an area that we really need to focus on.
Yeah, it turns out life gets hard. You've been married like 15 years and you've got kids at home, and then you're also gaining responsibility, not speaking from personal experience, but life can get, it does, life gets messy.
Yeah. And I think what I heard from a lot of women is it's tiring. It's hard to fight every day, and so what can we do to help that?
Well, I think they both hit on something very good that's also in the mental health realm, is that, again, that burnout piece, whether it be for medical providers, again, for those increasing in rank throughout, we go again at 9,000 RPM for how many years? And so looking at that, and then on the other end of that spectrum is if we could get a hold of new recruits as they come in, right? So the prevention piece is huge, that we don't seem to ever be able to get to because it's hard to fund. I can't prove that I prevented something, right? So why are you going to pay me for that? But there's plenty of different things and techniques that we can teach. There's some really cool research going on to try to see if things are effective as far as psychological flexibility and resilience. If we do teach some tools for that early on, maybe we can not reach the breaking point, which would be great.
Get there before the wheels fall off. How about you?
There's so many things. There's so many things. I think I want health and wellness and physical fitness to be part of medicine and how we care for people, and not part of how we judge people, right? Like, if we can keep you healthy, if I can care about you as a person, if I can say, hey, you feel better this way, you're stronger, oh, by the way, you actually perform better. I think if we shifted this narrative from, you're a bad person if you can't perform this physical feat right now, to obviously you came to this organization because you wanted to be here and you wanted to do this job and you wanted to meet this standard, right? Like, if you can't meet the standard, there's something wrong, and it's not with you, right? There's something that got in the way. You came here on purpose. You put this uniform on purpose, and you want to be here. And so what are the barriers? And if we take you and say, there's something else going on, what's going on? How do we help you meet the standard that you want to meet, that you came here to meet? Instead of this, well, you're bad, and so now we're going to judge you and shame you, and now it's going to become almost impossible to overcome that because it's going to feel really lonely, right? It's going to, and it's going to be harder for other people to come alongside you because then they're going to feel like they're marginalized too. I think if we can shift this into like, this is health and wellness, this is how we take care of people now and long term, because they want to be here doing this job. They want to serve this country, they want to wear this uniform. I really believe that people want to meet the standard. They did this on purpose. If we can shift that narrative, I think that that gives people so much more room to grow and to thrive and become the leaders that we want them to be.
And I see that too, like I kind of envision this future nirvana, if you will, where they allow us as on the primary care teams to get into more of the preventative space. Like I'm so sick of waiting until the wheels have fallen off. When we know that we're then costing the taxpayer millions upon millions of dollars because we're breaking the toys, and then the toys, we have now purchased that problem for the rest of that person's life, right? And so, you know, if we can get to a place where we are more the team doc, that, you know, the Kansas City Chiefs are never going to allow, like, oh, I'm not going to do anything about your nagging injury until you literally can't walk. Like, that's just not the way. So I think starting to treat our active duty members like the tactical athletes that they are would be a good first step. Do we have anything else online popping up? Okay. So I did have one that's very, like, kind of specific that came up during your talk on talking about intermittent fasting. So, like, hard right, here we go. So what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting in our last few minutes?
Should I go first?
Go for it.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it. I love eating.
Yeah, yeah. I don't recommend. This sounds miserable. I don't want anyone to do it. Yeah, no. Just from like a mental health standpoint, it's miserable. So I don't recommend anyone make themselves miserable. From a performance standpoint, right? In theory, any of our service members, right? You need to be ready at any moment. Okay, some more than others. But if you are in a fasting phase, you are not ready. You're not doing stuff. Your brain does not have the glucose that it needs. Your body is if you're in a fasted state, you are not ready to be doing something. You should not be training. You should not be making big decisions. It's not a good call. So from a body weight or body management, whatever you want to call it, standpoint, yes, we do have some data that suggests some versions of intermittent fasting, time restricted eating can work for body fat loss, okay? That's with like regular humans though. And typically what we see is a lot of those studies are in men. So, and I think we've seen from, I believe someone last year at the conference spoke about this a little bit. It's not an appropriate strategy or practice for women to be following. We just don't thrive in any sort of fasting manner. So it's not one that I recommend. I have had many soldiers attempt versions of this, and I help them through it because it's really hard. But they always stop. They always come back to eating like a regular person, and they always feel better. So it's not one that I recommend, but everyone is their own self-experiment. So if you don't believe me and you want to try it, you can find this out for yourself. You're welcome to, but no, it's not going to make you lift heavier things or run faster or think better. So it's not one I recommend.
I straight up become a less awesome person to be around, I'll be honest. I am awful when I'm not you. So I will do speed round as we got 2 minutes to close, unless there's one pushing anything. Oh, we've got one there, never mind.
One I wanted to bring up that's come up time and time again, from your practitioner standpoint and research standpoints, what are we missing in taking care of women going through menopause and senior leadership?
So much.
They're probably the most understudied, poorly understood group, most abused group of people in the military besides junior enlisted, minority race, and ethnicity women.
Facts. So, and yeah, we could go all day. Thank God you remembered because I completely forgot, so thank you. And so as we have more women rising to the ranks, senior NCOs and senior officers, they are right in the thick of it, right? And the brain fog and the things where your perimenopausal symptoms are really starting. I am like probably knocking on the door of that coming in my very near future. And we talk about, so I was in 7th grade, my mom was a home ec teacher. So she gave literally the here's the changes in your body talk to my 7th grade self and all of, my entire school. And so they're like, can we bring your mom back to do the menopause talk and know what we're talking about here? So I would welcome, what kind of education are we missing so that I don't have to pull my mom out of retirement to give the menopause talk?
Actually, you might actually know more about this. Was it Abby Smith-Ryan's team that just found like creatine? Doesn't it lessen a lot of menopause symptoms? I swear I just read it. There's something with creatine. I'll look it up. I'll find a better answer for you. I swear I just read something out of that lab that says creatine, like just normal doses, it's like the 3 to 5 grams of creatine daily lessens. Don't quote me on that exactly, but I swear I just read that. It lessens some menopause symptoms or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She said, I'm taking it. I'm going to start eating it
I'll
right now.
look it up. I'll find a better answer for you.
I've read the same thing. It comes with improved cognition and
Yes.
less loss of lean tissue, which is increasingly more being tied to reduced chances of dementia and bone loss and things like that.
Because we already knew creatine did a lot of these things, but they just tested it in, I think it was a pre-menopause and menopause group. I'll find the exact study.
Check. Going out to buy the creatine.
I think it's an understudied population.
Yeah.
But I will say, most wanting to be studied. I feel like when we were doing the body composition study, I had like bins of sex, ethnicity, age, and those over 50 bins for women were the first to fill. And one of the questions that they asked, are you asking questions about menopause? And I'm like, unfortunately in this study I'm not. We were asking if they were postpartum because we had some interest in body composition after. But that is a take-home message that went to senior leaders, is that if we're progressing the career of women, we need to understand, and that's an understudied population across the board, civilian and military. But military women want to be studied and they want to know what they can do better. I think that we were able to fill every single category for all the women, and we had a hard time recruiting men. Just like in the Ranger study we're doing right now, I got every single woman to volunteer. It's getting enough men. So the women want to participate. They want to fill the literature. They want to help the women coming up behind them. It's just the researchers and the dollars and the funding, which we're hoping that those opportunities are coming. But a great question.
Yeah, so with the White House initiative, we're hoping that you get a big injection of money to come in to help study some of these things, because as when I talked internally with Lincoln, it said the number of small men's underwear that I have been issued in my career is absolutely asinine, right? Like, I have so many small, long underwear that are men. But like, what I don't want is that my algorithms are then also the small men's underwear of algorithms. Like, please don't. So that's the call to action for the technical community, is to make sure that, we figure out how to garner some of these funds coming from the White House initiative and get women studied in a way that, again, does not make my AI algorithm the next version of my small men's underwear that I have like an Army Navy store in my house. I don't even know. But I did promise that we would end on time. I would talk with these people literally all day. So I appreciate you guys coming out here and sharing your time, sharing your talents. We do have a social right after this. So I think the closing remarks are to you.